In Final Fantasy IX speedrunning, there's a bunch of ways the game can screw you over. From random battles that can last up to 4 minutes, to a boss that can instantly kill world record contending runs at the end of the game, it's no surprise that many would consider FF9 speedruns to be unforgiving at the highest levels. Today, I want to show you how ridiculous these runs are, and several of the ways the game can send your attempts straight to the Shadow Realm, starting from the beginning of the game. In the very first fight with the Masked Man on the Prima Vista, there's a weapon you need to steal from him called the Mage Masher. While this isn't anything special, the weapon is needed to deal additional damage against enemies with Zidane, giving him an additional 2 points in strength early on. The next point where this weapon can be attained is in the Ice Cavern, so top runners would be leaving time on the table if they didn't go for it immediately. However, the only problem with stealing the weapon is that there's about a 6% chance of stealing the Mage Masher from the Masked Man. Since this is at the beginning of the game, runners will opt to reset if they don't get a drop quickly. This can add up as each attempt takes at least 3 minutes to reach the first fight, and top runners will look to finish the encounter at around the 3:45 mark in real time. Speaking of time, making the most of your valuable time is a difficult task. Thankfully, there's a free and easy way to do that with today's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is the best way to learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. Brilliant's learning platform is unique as focus is put on gaining an understanding from the ground up. Through hands-on activities in their lessons, you develop critical thinking skills that will not only help you build your knowledge on a specific topic, but also will let you apply these skills to anything that you do. One of my favorite lessons is the creative coding course because it teaches you how to think outside the box and develop solutions like a programmer would in real life. Now, getting hands-on work with these scenarios sounds like a time-consuming task, but the lessons are broken up to where you only need to spend a few minutes out of your day to learn something new. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Dr. Swellman or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off of an annual premium subscription plan. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Now that I'm done selling my soul to the corporate machine, we need to talk about the game's random encounters and why they're the worst out of the PS1 Final Fantasy games. Starting in the Evil Forest, you can get into random fights with enemies at varying rates. Only some of these are needed to make sure characters don't die in boss fights, but outside of that, they're a runner's worst nightmare. To start, loading an encounter is painfully slow. The transition, fade to black, and camera work waste about 13 seconds before the fight actually starts. Running away without Zidane's flee ability is very inconsistent, and fighting your way out isn't always an option. In total, you're looking at around 40 seconds lost for each encounter, and even more later on. The way RNG works in FF9 for encounters is dependent on a table set when you hit the new game option. 521 numbers are generated at that time in a table, and a pointer advances through this table as the game is running. After reaching the end of this table, the first 31 are XORed with the last 31, and the next 490 are XORed with the first 490, and then they're replaced. When moving around in areas that give encounters, there's a value in memory called distance traveled that increases. It starts at -1440 when entering a new area or after an encounter to give you extra time before a check happens. This check occurs when your distance reaches 960, and the game uses those RNG tables to determine if you end up in an encounter. This is done through a danger value that's assigned to whatever screen you're on. When an encounter check happens, this danger value is divided by 8 and then compared to the RNG number that's pointed to during that time. If the divided danger value is higher than the RNG number, then you get an encounter. If not, then the distance traveled rolls back to 0 and the process repeats. Because the values change at variable rates and the tables that are generated are dependent on when you start a new game, RNG manipulation of encounters is impossible in real time. However, runners can minimize the amount of movement in a room to reduce the amount of checks they get. There's also a mechanic when going into the world map when there's location text on the screen. As long as it's showing, the distance traveled value remains at -1440 until just after that text disappears. If runners are fast enough, they can get from point A to point B with no issues. For scenarios where this isn't the case, runners can do something called stutter stepping on the world map to prevent encounters. By starting and stopping your movement within one frame, your distance traveled value will not increase. If runners use these strats correctly, they'll never see an encounter on the world map. Now, even if runners manage to get through their runs with minimal encounters, there are many other things that can ruin an attempt. Let's talk about FF9's bosses and some of the other weird quirks this speedrun has. The solo battle against Black Waltz 1 and Sea Lion can be dangerous if you're low level from not getting many encounters on the way up. Top runners take more risks in this fight by healing at lower health and doing more attacks. There's only about a 2% chance to miss an attack here, but as every Final Fantasy IX speedrunner has come to learn, the game is sentient and knows the exact time it needs to strike back.
Ooh. Are you kidding me, dude? Are you kidding me? We just died again to Sea Lion. Are you kidding me, man?
Gizamaluk's Grotto has hornets which can berserk party members, removing player control and forcing them to attack. There's also Lamias which can confuse male members of the party, causing even more time loss. The boss here is Gizamaluk, who has high damaging water spells and physical attacks that can quickly wipe your party. At under 50% HP, he'll start using very strong AoE water attacks, making the fight even more dangerous. The best way to handle this is by using tents on him at the beginning of the fight. When using a tent in battle, it not only heals the target, but has a chance to inflict negative status effects at the same time. Since Gizamaluk is weak to blind and silence, there's a 50% chance that a tent will inflict those status effects. However, if the status effects miss, things can go wrong pretty fast. There is a way to inflict blind by using Zidana's Soul Blade ability, but because it doesn't take care of everything, the danger of death is still there. Moving onwards to Bermechia, while there's not much to say about the area itself, this place has the highest rate of encounters in Disc 1. The type of encounters you can get vary greatly, but the worst of them are the basilisks. These guys can use gradual petrify and waste a ton of time before you can get away from them. Because of how these encounters can be, it's not uncommon to lose minutes from 1 or 2 screens not cooperating. The Beatrix fight at the end of this disc is one that's not exactly dangerous, but she has ridiculously quick ATB, so she takes turns faster than the party. This can snowball fast, so a balance of ATB tricking and reviving characters are needed to survive the 10 turns it takes for the fight to automatically end. There's almost no room for error here, and if you blunder even one turn, you're likely to get a game over.
Oh! Oh god!
Going into Disc 2, we start to see gameplay without Zidane in the party. Since he's the only character with the flee ability, running away from encounters becomes much more of a task. Gargan Rue is just one of several locations where we'll see this, but outside of that, there's not much danger to the run. The second Beatrix fight in Clara's Settlement is kind of like the first when it comes to ATB, and can get out of hand quickly if you play a bit too aggressively. The Brutals was over 21 hours into a stream of an FF7, 8, and 9 speedrun that was being done in one sitting, and his run was an hour and a half ahead of his last one going into this fight.
If she quick attacks Zidane, I actually die. Just realized.
In the prison break sequence during the Alexandria Castle escape, there's 2 guard NPCs that can chase after you in an area with restricted movement. You only have Steiner and Marcus in the party, with Steiner being very low level if he didn't gain much EXP in Disc 1. The fights with these guards can mean certain death, but the good thing is, with some type movement, you can skip them entirely. A bit later in the escape, forced encounters with enemies called Bandersnatches start happening, and these guys are a bit of trouble. Not only are they strong, but they can put characters to sleep using an attack called Tongue. When you have all your party members, these fights are usually fine. The problem is when your party splits throughout the escape and at your lowest party count, you only have Freya and Beatrix. If you have bad ATB here, both enemies can put your characters to sleep and have a good chance of ending your run. Later on in Fossil Rue, there's a boss fight against Lonnie, one of the mercenaries that's chasing your party, and she's a mess to deal with. To start, Lonnie is one of the fastest enemies in the game with 50 speed. Characters in FF9 cap out at 50 speed as a comparison, and at this point in the game, The party is not even close to hitting that. Oh, and to top it all off, she will always attack first. There's a few things runners can do depending on how the fight starts. If Zidane has good ATB, you can use something called Lucky 7s. When Zidane has an HP value ending in 7, he'll get access to this ability, and he'll always meet this criteria going into this fight. Lucky 7s can either deal 7, 77, 777, or 7,777 damage when used, and as you'd expect, it's random on what damage roll you get. Zidane does about 1400 damage with a regular attack at this point, but given the structure of the fight and a good starting ATB, it's worth going for the quick kill. If you don't have good ATB on Zidane, there's a backup strat that runners can use, and if you don't get good ATB on anyone, well, good luck, buddy. Things mostly chill out until runners reach the Aoife tree, where the encounter rate is ridiculously high. While these aren't especially dangerous, we're at the point in the game where if you start a fight with bad ATB, Zidane can get sniped at the beginning of any encounter and could lead to a game over.
Well, oh no, uh-oh, this is very not good. No! Well,
the Soul Cage boss at the end of this area is a quick one, but runners have to make sure that Zidane stays alive when completing the fight. Soul Cage tends to lead with level 5 death, an AoE instant kill spell for any character with the level divisible by 5. So if Soul Cage gets a turn and you've already queued life to instant kill it too early, Zidane loses out on a ton of AP, which is required for certain abilities used in the rest of the run. Back in Madain Sari's second visit, there's a boss fight against Amaranth, another one of the mercenaries chasing the party. This fight is a 1v1 against Zidane, and with Amaranth being a fast boss, you're one missed attack away from a reset. The next run killer is one of FF9's most addictive and frustrating minigames that has an absurd amount of RNG. Tetramaster is a card game where you pick 5 cards to duel an opponent on a 3x4 grid. As you and the other player take turns, the goal is to capture all the opponent's cards by changing their borders from red to blue. This is done through lining up facing arrows on your cards with opponent cards that don't have any in certain spots. You can also put 2 cards that have arrows together where they battle it out and the one with the highest power versus defense comes out on top. At least that's what should happen, but instead, there's an RNG roll that happens with the stats that come up in battle, which can make some of the best cards in the game lose to some of the worst. On top of that, there's a combo system that sometimes lets you take multiple enemy cards at once when you win a single battle. Unfortunately, this works for the enemy side as well. So with that all being said, clearly Tetramaster is a balanced and fair game.
yeah. Oh my god, no way! No fucking way, man!
After seeing all that, I think I'm going to go play a real children's card game. During the fall of Alexandria, Mistodons that show up end up being similar to the Bandersnatches from earlier in the run where they can put you to sleep. There's a section where you only have Beatrix and Steiner in the party, so it's possible to see some big time loss if you're unlucky. In Oilvert, there's a boss called Ark who has a ton of AoE attacks with some that inflict confuse status. This boss is typically fine for veteran runners, but one slip up and you'll see your party decimated in a turn or two. Now it's time for Desert Palace, a dungeon that's a complete nightmare when it comes to encounter quality. Zidane is not in the party here, so the party doesn't have access to flee and must use the quick flee mechanic. While you're likely to not run away fast in these encounters, runners use various methods to get away safely. This is still inconsistent, with some runners getting stuck in encounters for minutes before they can move on. In Mount Gulug, red dragons that show up can be scary if they get turns in. They have a move called Twister that deals random amounts of damage when used, which will quickly put runners in a tight situation. After this area, things calm down for the rest of Disc 3. The remaining bosses are pretty safe here, even up to Garland and Kuja. They only use single target attacks, and it's really simple to revive party members when they go down. Disc 4, however, is where things get absolutely ridiculous. This whole section of the run is basically a boss gauntlet where most of them have a way to either instantly kill you or waste a ton of time. The first of these is Nova Dragon. This boss has Psychokinesis, Shockwave, Tidal Wave, Aerial Slash, with the additional move Twister also entering the move pool at 50% HP or lower. Runners really don't want to see two of these. Psychokinesis is a powerful single target attack that will probably kill one of your characters. This is rough as you only have half your party ready to attack Nova Dragon, but you can still recover pretty easily. Shockwave, however, is an AoE attack that does massive non-elemental damage to the party. It will probably kill two of the party members instantly if Nova Dragon opens with it, and there's a real possibility it will use it again on the next turn. It's not that likely, but Nova Dragon can end a run and there's nothing you can do about it. Kraken is one of the 4 elemental guardians that show up before the final bosses of the game, and he's notorious for wasting time. Between slow animations and counterattacks, Kraken can quickly reduce a good lead. The next boss is Death Guys, who has a very fitting name for what will happen as soon as the fight starts. On his very first turn, Death Guys will cast Meteor, an AoE attack that does random damage to the party. Each party member can take anywhere from 50 to 4,500 damage in increments of 50, and this can instantly kill your run. While there is a save nearby, it could take several tries to get past the first turn.
Come on, come on. Spin and my fucking soul.
In addition to this, Death Guys has both single target and AoE attacks that can hit the party for a good amount of damage. Death Guys also has death and level 5 death to cause even further pain if the fight goes on for too long. If you manage to make it past Death Guys, you face Trance Kuja. The main thing here is Kuja will counter anything while under 50% HP with Flare Star, but he can also just randomly use it at any time if you're unlucky. It's not that common, but that's just another scenario that can end a run. After all of that, now we're at the final boss, Necron. Compared to the previous bosses, this fight is much less likely to kill your run, but there's a few things he can do that'll ruin your day. First off, he can straight up bleed with Meteor. It doesn't happen every time, but when he does, it's basically Death Guys all over again. The way this fight is handled is through manipulating Necron to only use Blue Shockwave after his first move, which reduces a character's HP to 1, and him never using Grand Cross, a magic ability that inflicts random status effects on all party members. Necron will always use Blue Shockwave 3 times before using Grand Cross, then use Neutron Ring after Grand Cross. This is done by having all members attack themselves to leave everyone dead except Freya, then by following Necron's scripted AI, runners have Freya jump after the 3rd Blue Shockwave. Since there's no targets for Grand Cross, he'll skip it and will just start his attack cycle over again. This makes the fight very safe as long as runners have prepared beforehand. Honestly, it's kind of funny that this final boss is so tame when the rest of the game is straight up RNG hell. With that all being said, this is the RNG you have to deal with when completing a run of Final Fantasy IX. Top runners on the PlayStation 1 version have completed this game in just over 8.5 hours, with the Brutals holding the current world record with a time of 8 hours, 34 minutes, and 46 seconds. Anyways, if you learned something today and want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and it'll keep me from getting too addicted to Tetramaster. Stay hydrated, folks, and thank you all so much for watching.